9 months after that, and we really realized that we wish we had captured that some way to capture his essence. And so out of the spirit of that night, the Josh Warner Dialogue Series came to pass. So we established it in 2003 in memory of Josh, and instead of the usual lecture format, I have to change the page. So I apologize. The Dialogue Series takes a different format in which seasoned professionals in the field of experiential education interviews the honoree. The series allows conference participants to get to know the honoree on a more personal level while learning of their best practices, nuggets of wisdom, and sometimes stories of what not to do. The NERAC selects the Josh Warner Dialogue Series interviewee based on nominations from the AEE regional membership, and the series is taped and copies are available in the bookstore. So the past 6 years are all available in the bookstore. And so if you're interested in looking at those, they're great for teaching as well as for having an archive. And we send a copy to Boulder. So Boulder has an archive of this as well that they keep for the memory of the institution. Anyway, so this year we're really excited. The Northeast region is proud to honor Karen Warren as our Josh Warner Dialogue Series award. Since 1983, the same year she and a group of students jumped into a car and drove all the way from Massachusetts to Wisconsin to attend her first AEE conference. Karen can often be found in the field leading trips with students or working closely to support a student a student of hers to strive to be better. Since her first conference in 1983, Karen has been an active voice in the field, pushing us to be better practitioners and making her students and her colleagues reflect upon issues of social justice, gender, and privilege. And she has lots of stories to tell us tonight. Tonight, Tara Flippo has the privilege of interviewing Karen. Tara currently works at the Brown Center for Innovative Learning at UNH and is a clinical associate professor there in the outdoor education program. Before coming to UNH, where we're kind of lucky to have her, I'm just going to say, she was a manager and director at PA, Project Adventure. In addition to that, Tara has done a ton of stuff. She was assistant director at an after-school program, course director for Outward Bound, diversity trainer, and a contract facilitator across the Northeast. Tara and Karen have really come together in their efforts to teach and promote social justice in our field. You can often find them co-presenting at a workshop somewhere around. So it's really fitting that she's interviewing Karen this evening. So I want to introduce Tara to come up, and we'll start evening.
Notes, and it's actually good that I have notes because I tend to expand. Sometimes been known to ramble, so the notes are going to be helpful to all of us. So thank you in advance. So Karen has played 3 significant roles in my life: teacher, Hampshire College; mentor through social justice and all that she embodies as an educator; and friend. And friend was certainly a part of our Hampshire experience, but in all the time thereafter. I met Karen 22 years ago, so you can start doing the math. You now know how old I am. I met Karen 22 years ago as a first-year college student at Hampshire in Amherst, Mass. Getting to know Karen that first year solidified my desire to be an outdoor leader, and is very much a big part of the story of where I am today. I took every one of Karen's classes and was always wanting to see. I'm amazing, I'm a little nervous here. We're going to all just take a deep breath.
Wait, so you don't get nervous.
Smell the flowers?
Yeah, we're nervous. Don't get nervous.
Thank you. I actually do get it. Everyone's wrong. But I was eager. I recognized in Karen right away that she is someone I wanted to embody. I wanted to take every one of her classes. I was very passionate about some of the subject matter that she was teaching, and I became what you would consider a groupie. So I did take all Karen's classes, and then I was like, well, what's next? So I took Karen's trips. What's next? Okay, well, now's the opportunity to co-lead. The opportunity to co-lead wilderness trips with her, spring break, weekend trips. We never did a gym trip together. But it also was the opportunity to be a TA. And at Hampshire, we actually did not have a TA model. We were actually co-instructors. And I very much understood what that meant as an equal partner in the curriculum and equal responsibility and integrity. And then we were co-developers of a class. And there's probably no experience I had like that at my undergraduate level, to be able to design an academic semester-long class that had staying power. It was one that was successful, and Karen kept going after I graduated with that class. Numerous other things happened for Karen and I in terms of our evolution, her work on my academic journey, my committees, etc. wanted to keep that connection going, so when I went on to get my master's degree, which was a self-design master's study, I invited Karen to be a part of that committee. So I was able to retain her for another 2+ years of being in that life. But my experience was not unique, and I think that's a really huge gift that Karen offers the students of Hampshire College, the students of Prescott College where she teaches, as well as the students of us in the field, those of us who are lucky enough to attend her workshops, be a part of the work that she does. See, now I'm going improv. It's not good. I left my notes about 2 minutes ago. And you didn't. But we are really lucky to have Karen in the field. And for me, I'm thinking of Beth last night. I teased her about improv. For me, that opportunity that she gave me, I can recognize friends who are Hampshire College alumni. I can recognize students that I met today from Hampshire College, and all of us in between, because I'm going back now 22 years of my undergraduate career, that Karen has been consistent about offering the same type of experiences that I had to every single student that she encounters. And I certainly wouldn't be a part of the AE community the same way I am today if it weren't for Karen. That my first AE workshop as a presenter was well over 20 years ago, when I was in my 20s. And I think that gift, to be able to lead for the first time so early in my own professional development, I hope means I'm a more refined practitioner today in terms of how I train, but also what I want to learn from folks and how I even use these conferences for my own learning and education. So after 10 years of spending time with her as educator and mentor, which I mentioned, we have the opportunity to be colleagues and friends. And Karen and I have sought many opportunities to do wilderness trips together, and with those come all the things that, what happens on the wilderness trip stays on the wilderness trip. But huge opportunities, and I continue to enjoy, but also appreciate Karen's style of being in the backcountry and what she offers as a trip mate and what she offers as a friend. And there's probably no other person I'd rather play cribbage in the world with than Karen. We have some mean games in the tent of every kind of game possible, but cribbage is our go-to. So I'll leave it at that. I'm very proud tonight to be the person interviewing Karen Warren. She's meant an incredible amount to me in my journey, and I know she means a lot to many of us here. And I think she's a true treasure that the field has, and I'm happy that we're here to honor her tonight. So thank you for my helping me.
Thank you.
We're going to take one more breath. I'm feeling better, but let's just go ahead and do that. So a nice deep breath in. Nice job. So there's a few other pieces about Karen's story that I'd like to share just to put into context, because the bio that you have, you go, and then I'm going to sit down. But Karen's bio is a little bit longer, and of course even a little bit longer than I'm going to share tonight. But I wanted to share a few things that she's let us know about herself. Karen's been an instructor for Outward Bound. She's worked with educated youth and adjudicated youth, and sometimes they're the same. Environmental education, outdoor access, women's in camp, college and outdoor programs. Her first job, which she's going to speak about to some degree tonight, was to start and direct a high school alternative education program that used experiential methods and adventure experiences to prevent student dropout. After receiving her master's in experiential education at Mankato, several of you are in the house. Come on, Mankato! I know Stanfield is here somewhere too. All right, there you go. Okay, run it. So in 1983, Karen was there. Karen took her position at Hampshire College in 1983, where she teaches courses in experiential education, outdoor leadership, wilderness studies, and social justice. She also works with the master's and PhD students from Prescott, Leslie, and Vermont College, my other alma mater. Based on her PhD research on race, gender, class-sensitive outdoor leadership, Karen has written and spoken extensively on social justice issues in experiential ed. Her books include Theory and Practice of Experiential Education, Women's Voices in EE, and The Theory of Experiential Education. Karen has been honored with the 1998 Michael Stratton Award and the 2006 Outstanding Experiential Teacher of the Year, and the 2003 Blair and Carol Brown Outstanding Staff Member at Hampshire College. And again, these are only a few of the accolades and the contributions that Karen has made to our field. The list is endless, but we will let you go home tonight. So without further ado, I want to invite Karen into the conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. I made her.
thank a few people. It is a true honor. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? It is a true honor to be up here. It's a true honor to be surrounded by the names that are behind me, people that have been role models for me and just wonderful people in the field, so that's wonderful. I want to thank NERAC for organizing this. I think it's a great idea and a way to continue to understand how our history, how the shoulders that we stand on also help us to make the changes that we need to make in our field to be the kind of field that we want to be. I also thank the host committee. I have 2 of those pins, so I know what it's like. And what an amazing seamless conference that you put on. It's just incredible. So thank you very much. I want to thank Tara, not only for that great introduction that I still owe her for. And I'm going to have to let her beat me in cribbage now for the next 5 or 6 years, I think. But just to have the relationship that I have had with her as a student and watch her grow, and as Tara says, she's not alone. I can look out there and see other folks and over the years, and so it's just it's why I do it. And the last people I want to thank are my family who came here today, who have really allowed me to do what I do in this field, because they're back holding the home front down and encouraging in that. And so my partner Sue Tippett, who stand up.
Yeah.
Was one of the originators of wilderness therapy in Western Mass. And if you look at the old wilderness therapy book that Mike Gass put out, she's one of the original articles in there. So she's gone on to do other things, which sometimes we do, but she started in this field, and I'm really proud of what she did in terms of wilderness therapy in this field. And where we are today relates to what she's done too. And my second daughter, Shin Shin, stand up.
Come on, Shin Shin.
Come on. Unlike most of you here, but I know there's a couple of Hampshire students that this is the same thing. This is her second conference this week. I know there's a couple of Hampshire students that's true too, but Shin, we're really proud of her because Thursday she was a delegate at a youth, I should say the word preventing first, preventing youth underage drinking conference.
Yeah.
And, she was actually interviewed, and so it splashed all over my Facebook page of the interview. So that's and my oldest daughter, Amelia, we call her Yay at home, so I might slip into that. But Amelia, who wanted to be here but couldn't, but she's in New York City. She's a Hampshire student this year, and she's on field study in New York City, but she had to work, so she couldn't come. And but some of you met her because she came to the Montreal conference, so some of you met her. So that's my family. They're the foundation, right? So, shall we get started?
Yeah, let's do it. So
I
Karen,
guess that's why we're here.
can we go? No, we're not going yet. So Karen, how did you first get into the field of outdoor experiential education?
Just a minute. Am I staying hydrated? This story is about synchronicity. I started in the field of outdoor experiential education at a YMCA camp. And so I have come full circle. In fact, this lodge looks like the YMCA camp lodge that I started with. It was Store Camps. It was a YMCA camp in Michigan. And I started there my freshman year in college, or the summer of my freshman year in college. And I didn't really know what this thing, outdoor education, was. And in fact, I didn't even really have any skills in that. I walked around to one of those camp fairs because I thought I should get a job for the summer. And one camp was looking for a horse barn director, a pony barn director. Well, I grew up I was very fortunate, idyllic childhood, where I grew up. I had a 1,000-acre backyard because our house abutted a large metro park in Michigan. So I had this huge backyard, and my brother and I had ponies. And every day we'd go out and ride our ponies and stay out all day and snitch hot hamburgers from the freezer and go out and cook them. We get like pieces of fence and we cook them on the fence and eat them for breakfast and, with white Wonder Bread. So, I really loved the outdoors, but I didn't really have any outdoor skills. So I got hired to be the pony barn director at this camp. And so the first summer, somebody at that camp saw something in me. Maybe it's because all those little kids were holding on to me. Because when you're the pony barn director, you're the most popular person at camp. So all the little kids hold on to you everywhere you walk. So the camp directors thought I was probably doing a good job. So they decided that they would fast track me. This camp had a big tripping program, so they would fast track me on this trip and get in the tripping program. So they sent me on a canoe trip the last session of that first summer. So I'd go on the canoe trip. Well, of course, I didn't really know how to canoe. And because the only time I canoed at camp by then was with one little camper that was about the size of Anita Tucker's son. And it was a really windy day, and we started out at one end of the lake and it ended up in the private land on the other end of the lake. So I didn't really know how to canoe. So what I thought, when I was leading the trip, is that I should canoe in the back, the end, the sweep. I should canoe sweep, and because I didn't know how to canoe. Now, what's wrong with that picture? Okay, I'm glad you're laughing, because it makes me feel good about outdoor leadership. So, the camper I canoed with, we bounced off the bank for about 2 days until I learned how to canoe. Now, I have now since led thousands of canoe trips, right? But the thing I want you to know is you got to remember where you started, okay? Because that's where you'll know the beginner's mind. And so if you know the beginner's mind, if you remember where you started, you can be an effective teacher. So I think that's what I'm supposed to say. It's on this piece of paper, but I don't want to put my glasses on to read it.
So speaking of canoeing, I know you and I recently paddled before the Florida International Conference, and we were talking about some of your early years in Michigan, and that there's a gender barrier. That's surprising, albeit there was, but there was a gender barrier there of your colleagues getting opportunities that you maybe were not afforded. Can you tell some of the stories from those years? Okay. Or a story that I have in mind.
This was easier when we did it in the canoe. But I'm warming up. Oh, the story about the bus. Okay, so this fast track tripping program, biggest tripping program in the Midwest is SOAR camps, and so they decided that the next year they would send me on these 3-week trips into the Rockies, and so I was leading these trips in the Ozarks and the Wind Rivers and all those things like that. And I was learning on the job as we did in those days. We didn't go in the nose or out around, we didn't learn on the job. So one of the things I noticed is that in those days we would take big school buses to drive the kids all the way out from Michigan to Wyoming, quite a drive, but because we were taking 20 kids. Okay, 20 kids in the wilderness, in the Wind Rivers or the Ozarks. What's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture? Come on. Too many, okay? That was the days before L&T was invented. Okay, so it was too many. But the point that I'm trying to make is we had to drive this bus. Well, this bus was one of those buses that had a split axle. So there was 10 gears on this bus. Well, the thing I noticed is they only let the men, the male leaders drive the bus. Because it was too hard, for us to drive, the women leaders. So a friend and I that were starting to be involved in the tripping program said we would get nowhere in the tripping program unless we learned how to drive the bus. So we would get up every morning at 6 a.m. and drive the bus around the lake, like this. But we learned to drive the bus. And we felt like it was because we learned to drive that bus as women that we could start to be afforded some equality in leading some of the trips. And I think that, in terms of, I've since done a little bit of work in gender issues, a lot of work in gender issues. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is how, the things that we notice and that we can take action on, that it starts an avalanche of being able to make change. And so that other leaders, other women at the camp started to learn how to drive the bus, and that became the thing, you know, of really, you know, women's equality at our camp. Keep it up.
So you've had a long involvement with AEE. Can you tell us more about how you originally got involved with AEE and how AEE has impacted your life?
As I said in the bio, I came to Hampshire College and I had just finished this newly minted master's student in experiential education. And so they asked me the first class to teach was experiential education. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea how to teach experiential education. But I had these 12 Hampshire students. And so I thought to myself, well, I have these 12 amazing Hampshire students. We're going to figure out how to do this ourselves. So that was the beginning of, for me, creating a student-directed classroom. And I've since written about this, but the idea of together we're going to create a curriculum and create a syllabus. Well, so one of the things we thought is, I said, well, we should probably go to the AEE conference. Well, this was 1983. This was before regional conferences, okay? So there was only a national conference. Well, the conference happened to be in Wisconsin. So we decided, well, we should just go. And right about near like Cleveland, we thought to ourselves, this is a pretty long drive for a weekend. Well, we went. And I got there, and it was like coming home. It was like, these are the people I want to be with. These are the people that have the values, the educational philosophy, the pedagogy, the energy, you know, all the things that I really wanted in a career, in a career that I was already in. I'd been an Outward Bound instructor that summer. I'd been Outward Bound a couple summers. So yeah, we were doing it. We were living the life of AEE. So I get there. Guess who the keynote speaker was? Huh? Carl Ronke? What? Keith King?
Kurt Hahn.
What? Kurt Hahn? Only from the grave. What? Unrun. Josh Weiner. Okay? The keynote speaker was Josh Weiner. So we all, the students and I, would go and see Josh Weiner. And that was 83. I don't have a memory anymore. This is what I remember. I remember listening to Josh Weiner. And Josh Weiner was an extremely gracious man. You know, he just oozed. You could see why he made connections with people and was able to use those connections to do the great kind of work that he did. So he started out his speech, or somewhere in his speech, and he started thanking people, and more people, and more people, and more people. Some of these people I had heard of, and some of them I hadn't heard of. But one of the things that I noticed, it was a male friend, male colleague, male friend, and at the very end, so there's about 20 names of very influential men in the field. The last thing he said is, and the last person who's probably the most important is my secretary. And then he went on to tell his speech. And one of the things I noticed is he didn't mention his secretary's name. And it caused me pause, and I didn't know why at the time. But later on, a couple hours later, I started to think about it and realized that it's sort of like Kurt Hahn says about impelling you into action. I realized that here was an opportunity for women to be more involved in AEE, because it was pretty clear from Josh Weiner's speech, in a very impactful way, that they hadn't been at that point. Okay? And so it really made me say, what can I do? How can I change this paradigm? Because here's this long list of men and a secretary who she's not even named. So that's sort of how I, well, that's one of the first times I got an AEE, but it really, AEE has been a home for me for now 29 years, as long as I've been in Hampshire. It's about 20, almost 30 years. And the reason it's been a home for me is because of you all. And because of the good work that happens because of what we all do, both individually and collectively. And, you know, I've seen, and I'm going to continue to tell some stories, I've seen some amazing changes in this organization and in this field. And at the same time, I see a real opportunity for us to do a lot more good work.
So Karen, there's another story involving Lake Geneva.
Oh, yeah.
And I know there was a moment that you saw a sign and you had a decision to make about a gathering that was happening. Could you tell us a little bit more about that gathering and maybe the path that it set you on? If that's the right way to describe it.
Sure. This is a little harder story to tell because it involves me being fairly vulnerable here. So I'm at this conference and I'm just like, you know, so young and new and, you know, wide-eyed and wonderful. This is amazing. And I see this sign in the women's bathroom that says, any lesbian women involved in the field of, you know, outdoor ed, we're going to meet at a picnic table after the keynote speech, after Josh Miner's speech. And you know, let's meet at this picnic table. So I see that sign and I was like, oh my God, I gotta go. And then I said, oh my God, I can't go. What if my students are there? And because I had just, in the past few years, had come out as a lesbian. But not really come out, because remember, this is 1983, this is the Midwest, and this is, you know, the dark ages of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender liberation, okay? So lots of fear, lots of stories about people losing their jobs in the outdoor field, lots of stories about you know, women and men not being able to be out on courses or out in their organizations. So I vacillated back and forth, and I was just, there was such fear in myself, and my own internalized homophobia, to go to this picnic table. But this picnic table was a metaphor for me for, you know, facing my fear and doing it. But even while I was walking out there, so I walk out to this picnic table in the dark. This picnic table is like a mile from the conference center. It's literally a mile. No, it probably wasn't, but it felt like it. And you see what it is? It's this picnic table that's so far out. Because that's what the issue was in those days. It was so far out of the mainstream of what we were doing in the outdoor field. And there was so much fear around it. There's so much, you know, whatever. You know what I know. You guys are shaking it. You know what I'm saying. And so I just want to share that story because that's the way it was. And I want to, you know, fast forward today, where I'm walking around to all these workshops because I'm so hyper today that I can't actually sit through one of them. I did sit through one. But I'm hearing all these other ones, so I see, you know, and all of them, everyone I like just peek into, they're talking about social justice. And I'm like, whoa, that's a big change from 1983. So we've come a long, long way. But that's where we were. And I think we have to understand that, you know, we're not where we are today. And I think people that are students, you know, you're used to, like the millennials, you know, you're used to this stuff, okay? Back in those days, we weren't really used to it. There was a lot of backlash. So, did I labor that story?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks.
But you didn't say what happened when you got to the picnic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. This is a dialogue. I believe in Paulo Freire, it's dialogic. All our teaching should be dialogic, you know. I don't do this talking, so this, you know, keep talking to me, okay? So I get to the picnic table. There are, I'm going to get this wrong because I can't remember. There's either 4 women, because the story, you know, there's 4 women there, okay, out of this whole conference. In those days, we used to have like 1,200 people at conferences. That used to be different too. There was 4 women at the picnic table. And I'm still friends with most of them now. But, you know, that was the fear, you know. So, yeah. And so we talked about things, and then we left, and we went, whoa, we did it. And there was none of my students there. Which probably would have been better if there were.
So you've shared with us, and we've read it in your bio, that you summed up your educational philosophy into 3 areas or 3 statements. striving to balance theory and practice, helping students to claim their own education, and teaching to transgress. So I'd like to kind of walk you through more specific questions for each. So this theme is helping students to claim their own education. What are some noteworthy examples of helping students to find their voice and take responsibility for their education?
Well, this is a story I want to tell because I've been very fortunate for 29 years to teach at Hampshire College, which is a very special place. It's a very special place because of the students that are there. The students who are willing to take the risk to design their own programs, to paint outside the lines, we call it, color outside the lines, to really engage in their own learning and really claim their own education. So I was teaching this experiential education class that I mentioned, this different iterations of it, and about 15 years ago, we're sitting around in class talking about lamenting the fact that the aesthetics of education are often neglected. In other words, the classrooms that we teach in, the classrooms that we learn in, are usually pretty barren and kind of, non-aesthetic, and kind of not really very conducive to learning. And so we were talking about how really learning should happen in our living room. And so then I said, well, probably, we'd have to move to the living room. But you know what? Last summer I taught in a yurt. And so the students are like, oh, yurt, what's a yurt? Okay, this was before, everybody knew what a yurt was, right? Now we have money. And so I said, I taught in a yurt. And their students are like, oh, that sounds cool because that's a circle. It's all about the circle. So we were talking about education in a circle and a yurt and that sort of thing. And so in the next class, I brought in these articles. One of them that was in the JEE, the Journal of Experiential Ed, about teaching in a yurt and using a yurt to teach math. And so we were talking about a yurt. So the students said, okay, for our final project, we want to build a yurt. And I was like, okay. And sometimes final projects don't fit in the time frame that you have in class, so that was fine. So they started to do the planning for that, and so about 4 of them decided that was the final project. So they started doing planning, and it got really big, and so they decided to build a yurt on campus. And so for the next 5 years, the initial students designed a yurt. Raised $16,000 to build it, and trained students. They didn't just want to build a yurt, like just go out and build it, because some of them did have some building skills. They wanted to teach other students how to build and deal with issues like chemical sensitivities in it, and a lot of the political issues of how it would be accepted on campus and all that sort of stuff. So over the course of 5 years, and that generation of students graduated and new generations came on, and they built a yurt. And so there's pictures up there of the whole thing. And that was students claiming their own education, deciding that how they wanted to learn was for them to do a project together, community building. And one of the things that I really believe is that we don't go to anything in our lives, school, work, our careers or anything, to receive an education, that we really need to claim an education. And the job of the teacher is to facilitate that. That is our responsibility. We have an ethical, a moral, and an intellectual responsibility. That's what Adrienne Rich says. Adrienne Rich, who just passed away, an amazing poet and writer, and she urged that students claim their education. So I'm going to give you all a chance to dialogue, and we're going to dialogue around these 4 themes. 3 themes. Am I supposed to say this or you?
I can say, can you talk a little bit about the spirit of dialogic?
Oh,
Say more?
no.
Great. She's claiming her own experience. So we do have
Arbitrary dialogic.
We do have a question. How many people do you want in a group?
Maybe just a dialogue.
Great. So we're going to have you dyad, and you can be with somebody next to you. You can be with somebody that you want to be with. So in a moment, we're going to ask you to find a partnership, and then we will let you know when your time is up. We'll pack the mics. We'll get your attention. The question we want to Shia is, how do you want to claim your education? So how do you want to claim your own education? Find a partner, have a good conversation. Doing something fun with our hands.
Dad, Dr. Sugarman,
What is that?
God bless. Gets everybody focused. The signal. It's a technique.
Anybody else use this at camp? Right, very good. In that short amount of time, we hope that there were some rich conversations and potentially some thought-provoking conversation around how you can plan your own education. So here in a second theme that you talked about was driving to balance theory and practice. You are an accomplished writer, absolutely, and an accomplished contributor to the body of literature within AEE. Can you tell us where you got your start and how you built on that?
At Hampshire College, I don't live in a publisher or peerage paradigm at all. In fact, I don't have to write anything. So it wasn't. So when I started to write for publication or write for AE, it was well, for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that for me to reflect on experience, I do that through writing, and I happen to enjoy writing. And so I started to think about different things, and the easiest way for me to really think them through in kind of a theoretical way, somebody today, Anita, accused me of being theoretical, so I guess maybe I am, was to write about them. But it wasn't all that easy. When I first started to publish in the field was on gender issues because of my experience in trying to negotiate some of the early constraints that women had in the field. And I felt like someone needed to have a voice. Girls rule. That was perfect. Did you set her up? So I had to decide if I wanted to be that voice, and that's a really that's a scary place too, because you have to decide, kind of like for me tonight, you have to kind of decide that you have something to say, and you have to believe you have something to say, and guess what? You actually, when you do it, for me, when I started to write, I didn't necessarily believe I did have anything to say, but I acted as if. And went ahead and did it, and then I guess it took off from there, because I felt like at that point I could have some impact in the field of experiential education in a way that I knew I could through my teaching, and I knew I could maybe through workshop presentations, but I think it was another way to expand, how we can think about experiential education, and for me to think about gender issues. And so I started writing about gender issues, and then expanded to writing about the theory of experiential education and into social justice issues. Because in my trajectory, I started to realize that I couldn't talk about gender without talking, because it was hinged to everything else. And so I needed to talk about everything else too. So it was really about, sort of claiming that voice. That's why my first book was called Women's Voices in Experiential Education, because it was really this whole process for me about claiming a voice, and for women to claim a voice in this field. And again, a lot of that's changed, but it's also not changed. Well, it's changed, but it's also become more subtle of the complexities of it too. And so what I tried to do in my writing is make the writing accessible so that we could read it rather than be impressed by it. And so, that's what I've strived to do in writing is make it much more accessible in that way. And then finally, for me to be a mentor to other students and other writers and other particularly young women in the field of experiential education to write. and to get our voices out there. And so that's what I feel like my trajectory in doing that is. And so that's, for me, that's kind of, my theory of how to, how I do my theory in that balance of theory and practice.
So specifically about practice, Karen, can you talk about how you balance practice with theory? And also what you've been doing in your
Yeah, but first I got to tell you this story. So I go to this workshop today. So I'm going to tell a story from today because I don't remember a lot of the other ones, but I remember the ones from today. Don't ask me tomorrow. So I go to this workshop with these amazing UNH graduate students and undergraduate students, and they're talking about these 3 different schools. And so, they just do this great presentation. It's all full of theory and practice and all that sort of stuff. But it's mainly full of theory. They're talking about the culture of power and Lisa Delpit. And so I'm talking to one of these students at the end about the culture of power, and we're banding around some theories and that sort of thing. And the other guy that had just finished doing this wonderful presentation, he was part of this presentation group. He sits down next to us and goes, "We need to go rock climbing." And I was like, this is the balance of theory and practice. Because here we're talking about all this good stuff that they've been studying, and the other guy sits down and goes, "We need to go rock climbing." And I was like, perfect. Because that's what we need to do in this field. We need to be able to talk about this stuff and think about it and get theoretical, have the sources and read those good books and write those good articles. But we need to go rock climbing. Okay? And so that's for me, the reason that I've been able to be in this field for so long is I make sure I make time to go outside all the time. I ask my family too much. So, I make sure I do personal trips that push my skills. I make sure I, spend as much time outdoors and practicing the self-care that allows sustainability. And so that's, I think, a key to longevity in the field. Bell Hooks, who I'll talk about in just a minute, she says that really to be a really good teacher, you have to be self-actualized. And the only way to be self-actualized is to be healthy, is to live a balanced life. And so if we can live a balanced life, we're great teachers and practitioners. So that's the secret. Bye. There's some other part of this. So I go out, like a couple years ago, I just I wasn't pushing myself hard enough, so I said, okay, I'm going to go climb Kilimanjaro. So I, got, because that was it gave me something to train for, it gave me something to organize for, because I had to plan the whole trip. And so I that, and so every year a bunch of us and a lot of folks out here I've been on trips with. Look around the audience, see lots of people. So we go on trips because we're trying to maintain our practice. Because unless we do, the practice is what informs the theory, right? And it's the theory that refines the practice, or vice versa, however we want to say it. But the two have to be balanced.
Is there any other pieces you want to share around the family story?
Which family story?
Last balls. I don't know what that is.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's important.
Yeah, so the other balance piece is, in terms of being self-actualized and balancing, is I heard this at a conference back in 1984. A speaker said, what you have in your life are some balls. And you have these balls, and you throw these balls up in the air. You're always throwing these balls up in the air, okay? And you spend a lot of time keeping all these balls up in the air so none of them fall on the ground, okay? And some of those balls are like answering all the email you have. And some of those balls are like, saying yes to all the people that need you to do all the things that to be on conference committees. And some of those balls are things like your health and your family and yourself, okay? And those balls, your family, your friends, your health, those are glass balls. Because if those drop, they'll break. If the other ones, all that other stuff, are rubber balls. If they drop, they'll bounce. And they'll be back up there again. So, take care of the glass balls. And that's part of, for me, the balance of theory practice.
And Karen, I just want to recognize you that in the 22 years I've known you, Karen has a tradition of many things. She has traditions, but one of them is that she has a personal solo trip she does every November. And that modeling for me of that self-care, but also the commitment to no matter what, no matter how busy it is, and the travel and everything else, but to make time to do that has been an important modeling for self-care as well as the balance. So we want you to talk in. We're going to ask that you find a different person to partner with, and in this dialogue or partnership, we're going to ask you to answer, how do you want to balance theory and practice? So find a new buddy, you can take 5 minutes, answer the question, how do you want to balance theory and practice? Thank you.
Is that yours, Steph?
I didn't think I could do something, but that was kind of silly of me. I didn't think that I could do it. I can do it pretty much.
We're going to move on to our third
I just have to believe that I can do
teaching
it.
to
You'll
transgress.
see it when you believe it.
So Karen, you've been involved with social justice and outdoor adventure work for many years. Can you talk more about
Where do you start?
Oh, where was that? Social justice. Let me just say a little bit about myself, because a lot of times people that are advocates for social justice have a turning point, and I definitely had some turning points in terms of that. As I mentioned, I started a lot of my early work around gender because of my experience as a woman in the outdoor adventure field. And was able to see some changes, and also found a home in the Association for Experiential Education in the women's professional group, and was able to help develop that group to serve as advocacy as women, for women in the field of experiential education. And one of the ways that advocacy works is to be able to not only advocate for people without privilege, but also to ask for people to be allies. And so I started to think about all the ways that I had privilege in the field of experiential education, or just privilege and social privilege in life, and ways that I didn't. And started to think about ways that I could ask people to be my ally. And ask men to be my ally in the field, and to be at the same time advocating for women. So, so being a woman in the field, being a lesbian in the field, being raised working class in the field, being a temporarily able-bodied person. We talked about that today in the workshop. Like a temporary able-bodied person, so that won't change in a second. So those were kind of things that were turning points for me, or negotiating some constraints in the field. But I also realized that I had white privilege in this field, and I also realized that I had, when I first started out, age privilege. That's kind of evaporating as we speak. Probably something else, like ability, age, religion, Christian religion. So yeah, I had some places where I had privilege and places where I had experienced trying to get over some constraints. So a lot of that personal experience really drove me. Oh, I know, race. I had white privilege, but all of a sudden in the 1990, what was it? 94. We went to China and brought back this wonderful little bundle of joy named Yaya. And then we went in 2000. It was the only AE conference I missed Shin because I went to 28 AE conferences, but because we went to get Shin in China, I missed one conference. So I realized all of a sudden we became a multicultural family, and I had to try to understand how to do that. And boy, that's daunting. And so there were a lot of turning points for me, and I realized that this was a field, and this was a group, outdoor adventure education, that I loved, that I had tremendous passion about. But every conference, I would do the look around the room test. Does anybody ever do that? Okay? We look around the room, and what do we see? Yeah, we don't have a lot of visible differences. And to me, I love this field so much. Unless we deal with social justice issues, we're going to continue to do the look around the room test, and we're going to come up with the same result. And what we know is that the demographics of our world are changing. So a field that we can love so much, we can really just kind of become obsolete. Because these demographics are changing, and if we still, kind of look the same. So we need to do something. There's a call to action. And what did Kurt Hahn say? Your disability is your opportunity. So we have a call to action. So that was great to go around today and all these workshops. It wasn't like we have a social justice track, which we do, which is great, and I remember when that came in. But we not only have a social justice track, we have all these other tracks that people are talking about, I don't know, ropes courses. They're talking about the Civil War. I was hearing that when I was in my room. The Civil War, and it's really about social justice they're really talking about. Or they're talking about 3 experiential learning schools, and they're talking about the culture of power, or culture of power. So, I think we're making some changes, and we're making some inroads the way we really need to do. And as Tara said today to me, which, she's my role model, she said to me today, what did you say today? Good luck. No, this is what she said. I know what she said. Okay, so she says to me today, she just did this amazing workshop. She hit the ball out of the park. And then she says to me, I'm going to keep doing this work until I don't have to do the work anymore. Okay? I could do lots of other things, is what Tara said. I could do lots of other things. I could teach about theory of youth development or everything, but I'm going to do this social justice work until I don't need to do it anymore. And that's how I feel about it. I need to do this work because we need to, because we all need to do this work. And so that's why I've been really kind of passionate about it. I've done a lot of writing and workshopping and all that. I'm thinking about it. Because in the early days, I guess I could keep talking. It's your show. Because we're doing it differently now. In the early days, what we used to do, I remember this in early AE conferences, we'd invite people of difference to the conferences. And we invite people of color to our programs. But what we didn't do is change our programs or change our thinking and change our paradigms to make those programs truly welcoming to all these people we were inviting. We were stuck in what I call the invite paradigm. And so I think we've become a lot more sophisticated to realize that we need to move beyond the invite paradigm and not just have faces at the table, but have programs that the values, the paradigms, the ideas behind those programs really reflect the differences that we have in our culture. Okay, and not be stopped by the history, for mine, of outdoor education, history that has wonderful values that we can learn from, but some of those values catch us in being able to truly deliver programs that are inclusive. So I think that's where we're going. And that's when Bell Hooks, she has this wonderful book called Teaching to Transgress, and I think any educator ought to read it. It's called Teaching to Transgress, and then it says, Education as a Practice of Freedom. And I think in order for us to educate or to be practitioners and transgress, we need to be willing to step outside those boundaries and educate toward freedom. Toward the practice of freedom. And so one of the things I've always loved about AEE and all of you folks in the room and all those folks in the room over all these years for me, somebody got a message, is how passionate we all are, how passionate you are about doing the right thing, about delivering these amazing programs and working with these amazing people to really be inclusive. And the beauty of it is we have all the tools to do this. We are the people that can do this because experiential education is really something that allows us to move toward accessibility. And so, you know, in a lot of ways, we're very blessed. And so we need to use those tools to be able to do that.
So this is your opportunity to think about teaching to transgress or practice to transgress. I'm going to ask you to have a third partnership. This is yet a new buddy. And if you need to leave your seat and area to find that new person, that's great. But have a short dialogue on how do you want to teach to transgress or practice to transgress.